Good morning, all. So I want to thank Joe Masabi for setting this up. I want to thank Mike Heimer for letting me use his computer here. My name is Jim Bunshow. I am with the Montgomery County Master Gardeners. We have a demonstration project here that we started in late 2002. It has developed into two systems now. We're running two parallel systems. And what we're going to talk about are basic concepts today. We're going to talk about specific challenges that we found in the industry, and also just kind of give you a brief idea of what we have accomplished here. So as we go through the slides, again, about every 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to pause, ask for some questions back and forth. You can certainly post questions through instant messaging. And if you're familiar with aquaponics or aquaculture, then a lot of this is going to fit right in with exactly what you're currently aware of. You know, we all have a basic idea of what's happening with aquaponics. We're looking for that symbiotic relationship between the plants and the fish, and it's really just a matter of getting that balance, trying to determine how much growing space I need, how many fish are going to provide the nutrients that are available to maintain that system. A little bit of a historical perspective. You know, it's just like rainwater harvesting. What was old is now new again. Both the Chinese and the Aztecs had been practicing some form of aquaponics, you know, hundreds if not thousands of years ago. The Aztecs were about 1000 AD.
Jim?
Yes, sir.
Are you moving slides?
I am on my third slide now at this point.
I still see slide number 1.
Okay, let's go ahead and try this again. Okay, back on slide 1. Sharing now. Okay, so now we should be on slide 2. Has everyone got slide 2?
Okay.
Are you there? Okay.
Because I'm a co-presenter, please say slide 2, then I can move it here on my end.
Very good.
I think everybody sees what you're seeing except me, so just say next slide and I'll follow you.
That's fine, and I'll make sure that I see it updating that it is moving here also.
Okay, thank you.
So again, the basic concept we're pretty familiar with. Plants and animals, or plants and fish specifically, living in the symbiotic relationship. The plants acting as a natural filter for the fish waste, and then returning clean water back to the fish. It seems like a pretty simple concept. There are details involved that will become more evident as we go along. The historical perspective, we're now on slide 3. We talked about the Aztecs and the Chinese and their methodology of growing in suspended rafts on shallow ponds. There are some remnants of this still available in Mexico today. And it's really kind of an interesting concept if you think about it. It's basically a large compost pile built on top of a shallow pond, and the organic material that is decomposing provides not only a structure for the plants to root in, but they can then pull that out, compost it normally, return it as part of the overcover for the rafts in the future. As we look at aquaponics, one of the needs that we'll also see in the industry is a replacement for the styrofoam rafts that are so popular. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go on. Slide 5, again, the Chinese had been participating in a very similar concept, and even today you'll find that the relationship between fish, between pigs and or ducks, the excrement being used to provide some nutrient to the fish, and then also that overflow going off into the the rice fields or to the vegetable fields. Hygiene, of course, is an issue. We may consider this a third world concept, but in essence, it is still providing that nutrient flow that people are looking for in a perhaps a little more renewable method. Excrement has been used for centuries, and in some ways, bat dung or bat guano is still very popular in the organic fertilizer industry. Cotton seed waste, so it's not too far afield. Some of the people that we want to give recognition to in aquaponics, and some of you have had contact with British Virgin Islands or University of Virgin Islands, Dr. James Ricosi. He's a very popular individual in this field, and probably 4 or 5 people were working in this concept at about the same time. It seems like a lot of the early research came out of the University of North Carolina. It also came from, that back to the land movement that was so popular in the 1970s, late 1960s. People were looking for methods of growing vegetables in a little different manner than conventional row crop farming had been. It doesn't really matter who you say started it. It's a concept that's developed and is continuing to develop. If you've done your research, you'll see that there are probably 4 basic methodologies out there, and then spin-offs from that. Everyone is still tweaking individual systems. Dr. Ricosi in the University of Virgin Islands, he finally got to the point where he had a repeatable, sustainable system that had proven data. So that's what we're really here to talk about is systems that are repeatable. We can all come up with one methodology, but if it's repeatable, then it becomes much more valuable. Slide 7. What we're really, if you go back to the comment about the Aztecs and the compost piles and the floating rafts, and the Chinese to a great degree, what we're really talking about is a wastewater treatment system. If you forget about anything else, it is solids management that is going to create a successful system which is repeatable. Thank you very much, Joe. The repeatability and the maintenance issues in aquaponics is probably where you see more failures. Fish waste, of course, is a semi-solid. It is not fully dissolved in the water. You have floating particulate matter, and that tends to clog, whether it's grow beds or whether it's sedimentation that forms underneath the raft systems. That solids management is really a critical issue. The aquaculture industry, and that's aquaculture, raising fish in high density containment ponds, or it could be large poly tanks. Aquaculture has quite a bit of research and quite a bit of data on the maximum stocking densities, which is a term that you want to kind of become familiar with. Maximum stocking density relates to the total biomass within those tanks, whether the fish are at 4 ounces or 3/4 of a pound. It's still the total biomass within that area. And the aquaculture industry can push that to a very high level, sometimes as much as a pound per gallon of water. If you think about a 1-pound fish in a gallon of water, they're shoulder to shoulder. So you've got to be filtering and aerating and managing that system quite aggressively. The aquaponics industry has looked at it and said, well, we've got this technology that seems to be working. People are concerned about the waste management and the degradation of the quality of the fish in these contained ponds. So let's push it a little bit out and start using, lower stocking densities and letting the plants become part of the filtering mechanism, and the plants also become part of the food process or food production system. The hydroponics industry is fairly well developed at this point. I have no direct experience in hydroponics, nor in aquaculture. My experience has been over the past 4+ years, and probably 20+ years prior to that in organic gardening. But the last 4 years has been looking at systems, going to some of the leaders in the industry and attending their lectures, and understanding how small-scale systems for the homeowner seem to be one of the most aggressive areas for interest right now. The hydroponics industry has acres and acres of production, whether it's hothouse tomatoes or cucumbers or whatever crop they feel that they can produce most advantageously and sell at a profit. They have a good track record, and it uses that teaspoon of this, teaspoon of that, a fairly well controlled environment to produce repeatable products. We're going to come back to that thought process. Keep in mind that we want repeatable success here, and we want repeatable solutions or repeatable systems. So aquaponics using plants and fish in this symbiotic relationship tries to create this nutrient solution rather than introduce it a tablespoon at a time. That's not to say that we do not add buffers and or chelated iron into our system. Most often you'll find that the growers who are doing this on a professional basis or a successful basis augment their systems. But we're trying to create a more natural process in a healthy ecosystem, so that as you transition from a chemical-based issue or a chemical-based solution, you transfer that into a more natural, healthy ecosystem. So now we're on slide 9, just to make sure everyone's up to date. When I was working with Tom Leroy when we first started this, and he was the horticultural agent here in Montgomery County, and we had talked about it, and the organic gardening industry and row crop production are not at odds with one another at all. I think everyone is interested in food production, but what you have to get past is the wow, that's neat. Once you get past that, wow, that's neat, what are we going to do with it? Then you start looking at things that are a little more meaningful. Everyone can build a Ferris wheel with plants at the top that rotates in the sun, but if it's not production oriented, you're just going to say have something that says, wow, that's neat. The people that are really driving this, if you look on the internet, the people that are really driving this are the small backyard growers. The commercial growers are still not necessarily on board with these systems. There are many successful aquaponic systems out there, but you'll find most of them are still 1 acre or less. And you compare that to the hydroponics industry, and that's still a relatively small segment of our food production. So a lot of people are looking at this for restaurants, for on-site baby green production. They're looking at the homeowner as an excellent customer for this system. So from a business standpoint, you also need to look at it and say, who is my client? If you're a market gardener and you have no soil and you're trying to grow on a concrete parking lot, then you have limited options. If you're a market gardener that is trying to get a product to market consistently, then you need some sort of a protected or modified environment. And that's where the aquaponics system is kind of going. You know, we're looking at a protected environment to some degree, or a controlled environment, so that you don't have the hailstorms, you don't have the damage that may occur. You're producing crops on a rotational basis. So if you look at it and you say, who's my client? It's the homeowner right now is where I see most of the growth. Quite frankly, the guys that are going to be doing it on an acre or more are knowledgeable. They're going to go to the leaders in the industry, and they're going to either help them design and install the system, or they're going to have had 5 years worth of trial and error to get to that point. Nothing wrong with that at all. So my congratulations to anyone out there that's trying to do it on a commercial basis. Why do we even want to look at it? Well, you know, on the homeowner side, the homeowner's looking at it and they're saying, well, again, wow, that's neat. They're also saying, well, I don't have to bend over and garden. I don't have to bend over and pull weeds. And if you think about it, you're actually getting two products. You're getting fish and you're getting vegetables. The system that we have here, we've harvested fish twice. We have successfully cut baby greens and sent them into our group on a regular basis. And I really think that that's something that a basic homeowner can replicate fairly easily. So if a homeowner is looking for a limited amount of protein through fish, a consistent amount of baby greens, then these systems do work very well. So what do we really want to do? It's again deciding who your client is. I mean, if you're trying to create a niche market, this is a unique method of doing that. You can go to your farmers markets. You can go to the local restaurants. You can say to them, this is a little bit different product. It's a little bit different in its method of production. There was a gentleman that was talking about a pilot project in Houston, and I apologize for not remembering the name, but he was approached by a private individual that wanted to set up food production on hardscape, on abandoned parking lots, or it could be on a rooftop, or it could be in front of a restaurant taking up 2 or 3 parking spaces. I think that's an excellent market. I think that there is a business model there, and I've personally looked at it, and I think there is a business model there. And because we are, at least as master gardeners, we are tasked with sharing and encouraging, I would suggest that if we look at Austin has recently enacted a food composting ordinance for restaurants over 5,000 square feet that I believe in 2015 they're supposed to be composting their restaurant waste. There's a ready-made market right there for that compostable waste that I'll share some other ideas with you in the future. But niche markets, look at that. Protected environments are certainly something we talked about. Can help mitigate some of the weather risks. So all of these things are challenges that we're looking at trying to overcome. one of the things that I want to caution you about, and also encourage you to remember that you're not only dealing with vegetables, but you're dealing with live animals. When a system fails, it fails and the fish die. There's just no two ways about it. You come in, you've got 200 pounds of floating fish. You've not only set yourself back in terms of time, but it's also kind of a sad event for that time. So be careful when you start these systems. You want to understand that they are live animals. They want to be living in clean conditions. They want to be eating well. That excretion is part of the process that helps our vegetables grow. Alarms and backup systems are still, well, I don't know how to say it. They're still in their infancy. So as the industry progresses, unless you invest in the commercial side for a large amount of money, you go on vacation, the power goes off, a pump fails, and you come back and you've got floating fish. I have personally had 2 system failures. And so, again, I don't want to dwell on it, but they are live animals. If you're trying to do this on a commercial scale, please remember that unless you invest your own money, banks will still look at this as a speculative industry. You guys deal with farmers trying to get crop loans, I would assume, from many different angles, and so without a proven history, it's a little difficult. So we're going to go to the next one, and again, this is just kind of a repetition of some of the things that are understandably apparent. Plants need nutrients, whether it's organic fertilizer, urea, however you look at it, they need a robust supply of nutrients. So that's part of the fish's job, is to provide this robust supply of nutrients. And where are they getting it? Where they're getting it. You're limited in what you can introduce into these systems because, again, the fish are the first things that these chemicals pass through. So they've got to be, you can't just dump a pound of urea into the growing bed and expect it not to affect the fish. So it's primarily a result of the mineralized, dissolvable nutrients that are available in this water, and they're getting it from the food. The fish, the only input into these systems is the fish food. Other than supplements, the only input into these are fish food. So you want a good quality food, a high protein food, something that is well balanced for the fish. We personally use floating catfish food, 32% protein. We feed, we'll talk about feeding rates in later slides, but a lot of people look at trying to use other supplements and growing their own food, and we'll touch on that here in just a little bit also. But the reality is that you will be adding things like calcium and iron and magnesium to these systems so that you can buffer the systems, keep the pH in the proper range, and also supply some of the missing nutrients that the plants need. And the last thing that we're going to touch on, and we're going to come back to this again and again, is solids removal. So solids removal is a critical area. Okay, I'm going to stop for just a minute, see if we've got some questions about that, and just give you all about 5 or 10 minutes to jump in here. No questions?
Yeah. Jim, can I say something, Jim?
Sure, go. Sure.
Just for those interested in starting a system, if you want to build a 30 by let's say 100-foot greenhouse, a complete system from beginning to end is about $25,000 to $30,000, including the cost of the tunnel, the plastic, land, all the material to build the system, the cost of the fish, cost of the minerals. So it's not if you want to be a producer, preparing a good business plan for the bank is very important. It's not cheap.
Right. So a couple of questions here. Janet asked, did the fish die when the system went down? Yes, they did, Janet. They died. It was actually a temperature probe that was monitoring the temperature in the water this last winter. It was on a new system, and the temperature probe actually was out of the tank. Somehow it had been moved or bumped or whatever, so the temperature probe went out of the tank. The thermostat never realized that it was hitting a high temperature level, and unfortunately at about 110 degrees the fish died. Now, on one hand, that proved that the we've had heaters in these systems and they run successfully. It's just a matter of being cautious to make sure that they're functioning properly. Fortunately, it was a startup system. We had very few fish in it. The other instance was someone had actually come in and tripped a breaker and did not realize that the breaker had been tripped, and we lost about 100 pounds of fish in that particular instance. That was in another project in another part of East Texas. Type of fish, we're using tilapia, and we'll cover additional types of fish that we can be used. That's certainly of interest, but right now tilapia is what we're using. Baby greens. Baby greens are greens that are cut at a small stage, typically 4 inches high. They're considered part of that lettuce mix. So we're growing in our particular system. We're growing in a rather unique hybrid environment. We get the greens up to about 4 to 6 inches. We give them a haircut. That becomes the salad mix. And so that's what we refer to as baby greens. If you want to grow full-size lettuce, we're doing that more in the raft system. And I've got pictures at the end of the presentation on that also. Can it be done in a warehouse? Well, what do plants need to live? They need light. They need light. It's going to increase your labor costs. I'm sorry, not labor costs. It's going to increase your overhead, but certainly it can be done. I would suggest that as we look at this, we're going to start talking about splitting the system so that you're maintaining the fish perhaps in a more temperature-controlled environment. The greens can be outside. pH is adjusted. Excuse me. pH is adjusted through using buffers such as calcium chloride. I'm not saying that right. Calcium carbonate. Thank you very much. And agricultural lime, which is calcium carbonate. And then we're also using magnesium carbonate. So that is how the pH is adjusted down. You'll find that your systems, that's how we adjust the pH up. You'll find that your systems functioning properly will actually naturally acidify, and we'll look at that about in quality control. But one of the slides in this presentation will mention the specific chemicals that we use, and they're calcium carbonate and magnesium. Some people use hydroxides. We do not. Regulations on fish keeping in sales. You need, because tilapia are an invasive species, you will need a license for keeping those fish and transporting the fish. typically what we do is we buy them, and we'll cover this in a little bit more detail if you don't mind. I'll come back to this. Sales, typically they are you're going to have to go through the health department. If you're going to try to sell filleted fish, you start looking at health regulations, filleting them, delivering them dead or alive. Not a lot of people are interested in taking live fish. Some of the restaurants may, if they're on site, but regulations on keeping and sales is a health department issue, which would probably be through the individual market that you're trying to sell into. Nutrient levels, typical test kits for pH and ammonia and nitrates and nitrites are available as freshwater test kits. One of the suppliers that we've used in the past is out of Florida, and I'll make sure that I include that in the links. It is Pentair, Pentair, Aquatic Ecosystems, and they sell every testing device that you'd ever want to see. Dissolved oxygen levels are something that we have not tested, and to be honest with you, in a healthy system, you can do that almost visually rather than checking. Some people are very specific. We test every week for pH and ammonia and nitrates and nitrites. Interesting question from Laura. How does this relate for raw manure applications? Laura, I'm gonna bypass that one for a minute, and when we come back and start talking about worms in the system, then we can talk about that a little bit more. But this is not a we're not putting manures into the system. Garbage feeding licenses for fish. Interesting. I need a little more information on that question. Garbage feeding licenses for fish. Microgreens, Joe Masabi, thank you. Possibilities for funding through Young Farmers Grants. What type of heater is used in a backyard system? One of the simplest ones we found, John, has been a bucket heater. And it's literally from the ag supplies or farm supplies. It's literally a submersible heater. It's a 1,000-watt heater. That's more than enough for a 150-gallon tank. But electric heaters, the larger systems up in the north, they'll use natural fired gas heat exchangers. But for a backyard system, a bucket heater, and that's what we're using here. You can also make one yourself, quite frankly, out of a submersible hot water tank heater. Just remember that water and electricity do not mix. Do you feed your tilapia catfish food or something different? It is floating catfish food, and some people will talk about black fly larvae and duckweed, and we'll touch on that a little bit too. But if you can grow and you don't mind being hardcore, black fly larvae are a high protein live food that the fish like. I thought that WA just for grass, or thought that was just for grass carp, the license. No, tilapia is also considered an invasive species, at least south of I-20. And you may have some areas that are further north, but down here in the good old Houston area, tilapia is considered an invasive species, and if you bring in tilapia into this area, it needs to be by a commercial carrier, and you probably need to check with Parks and Wildlife and see if there are any restrictions on that. They die here in the fall, correct. If the temperature drops below, this is talking about tilapia breeds, they typically die at about a 45-degree threshold. Some of them will overwinter, though, quite frankly. Tilapia breeds are common. Mozambique tilapia is the most common that we see down here. Mozambicus australis or something like that. But Mozambique tilapia are the most common we see down here. Rapid growing, they'll basically live in a mud puddle, and And they're good, clean tasting fish. Okay, we're going to jump back into the presentation if everyone's okay with that. We're at 9:30 now, and we're about a fifth of the way through, so we're cranking on through. Last question, Janet. I'm going to hold that one for the last for the catfish because we do cover that in the last part of the slides.
Link to that website. It's aquaticeco.com.
Pentair, P-E-N-T-A-I-R, Aquatic Ecosystems.
.com.
Mm-hmm. I believe that will come up. If not, just Google Pentair Aquatic Ecosystems. Okay, system types. As you do your research or as people come in and talk about it, the three basic systems types that are out there now are raft, nutrient film technique, NFT is sometimes referred to, and media, which is gravel media or hydrotone or some sort of a media that is part of an ebb and flow system. The raft type is most often referred to as the UVI type systems, and I think I'm going to bounce to the next slide and let you take a look at it real quick. Has everyone seen this photograph as they've been going, or I assume that most everyone has seen a photograph similar to this. This is the University of Virgin Islands. This is Dr. Ricosi's project that they worked on for about 30 years. And you can see that those are long, somewhat elevated growing beds. And within that, they are floating in 1.5 inch thick styrofoam sheets, and then the plants are planted within cups within those styrofoam sheets so that the roots then hang into the water. So that's what a raft system looks like. And please excuse me going back, but I'm going to bounce back up here real quick. And we look at it and we say, okay, well, we've got these long beds. They're lined with a rubber liner of some sort. They need to be level. They can't be on a hillside unless you break them up into many, many tiers. And you're floating a styrofoam sheet within this raft. One of the things that you have to remember is that you're going to need air within these beds. So all along this bed, you're actually looking at air stones being placed that are providing oxygen to the roots. Because certainly if you just put put the plant roots into a stagnant pool of water, they will not grow and have the oxygen that they need for proper uptake or for proper health. And the roots will become brown, and certainly it's not going to give you the results that you're looking for. Even if you move the water through at a fairly rapid rate, they have found that air stones in these beds are absolutely critical. This is the actual system model. This is publicly available. You're welcome to take a look at it in more detail. If you look on the left side of that model, there are 4 brown fish tanks. Those are where the fish are raised. In his particular model, he's doing staggered harvests so that fingerlings would go in one tank. They're raised out to, let's say a 1/4 pound. They move to I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. They start with fingerlings, and then 6 weeks later, they fill the second tank with fingerlings. So that the first tank now has grown out. Then the third tank is stocked with fingerlings. So you have 3 stages of growth, and then the fourth tank is stocked. So by the time you have finished stocking the fourth tank, the first tank is ready to harvest. So he's doing a staggered harvest. The sump and the clarifier and the filter tanks and the degassing tanks are all part of the solids management. So if you look at everything to the left of the green bars and you have nothing on the right-hand side, that in theory should maintain the fish in a healthy environment. That's nothing more than a glorified aquaculture system. The food is there, the filtering is there. The only thing that you're not taking out are the nitrates. And the green floating rafts are where you're pulling out the nitrates. Most of this is by gravity flow. This is a single pump system. When people start designing systems, most everyone is doing a single pump system. And then everything flows back by gravity into the sump. This was actually an early design prototype of the UVI system. So if you look at how far the industry has grown, this is approximately 30 years old. This is one he shared at one of the seminars I attended with he and Dr. Leonard, Wilson Leonard. So if you look at it, there's where they're at today. There's where they were 30 years ago. So significant difference. These are the basic filtering tanks. They had fish underneath the plants. So quite a bit different. Nelson and Pade is one of the consultants that is in the industry. They have modified his design for the homeowners. They sell complete packages. So as you're being asked by your clients, who sells complete packages, what kind of cost am I looking at, you can see this one is $3,000. For $3,000, you get two 3x5 grow beds, so about the size of a standard office desk, 2 beds, and a 110-gallon fish tank, plus the filters, the pumps. There are no heaters in this system. At least those are optional items. You do not get the fish. The raft styrofoam, I believe, comes with it. But basically what you've got to still look at is some place to put it and some method of maintaining heat to the fish during the winter if you're in that climate, or if you're growing a fish that is sensitive to the cold. But it's a $3,000 system. They exist. They're out there. I think for another $600, someone will come and install it for you. So this could be a school-based system. We did not opt for a package. We opted for a build your own system. We built ours ourselves. Again, we're still talking about rafts. You can see, this is slide 18, you can see that the styrofoam sheet, this is actually standing up vertically. To the left of the styrofoam sheet is a red leaf lettuce called Lola Rosa, I believe it is. And then you have the root mass that is hanging to the right. So we literally took this out for a photograph. The roots are typically contained within a growing cup, and then they penetrate through the cup, go down into the water, pick up the nutrient. This is out in full sun, actually under shade cloth. But that's how they grow in the rafts. You can see the kohlrabi to the right, upper right-hand corner. Also the root mass going in there. That's a nice sized kohlrabi. It's about the size of a man's fist. And then they've got some young cucumber plants or squash plants. Looks like squash in the lower right. So this was the system in Apopka, Florida. It is based on the UVI system. This is at Pentair Aquatic Systems. And I was there. I'm trying to use slides that I have actually touched their system, so that it's just not pie in the sky. So if you have a question, did you see it? Is it real? I can say, yeah, I saw it. And the successes and failures are very, very much in evidence. So the second major style that you'll see out there is nutrient film technique. This came out of the hydroponics industry. I believe in Epcot, Florida, a lot of their production is through nutrient film in the hydroponic section. So this came out of the hydroponic section. They're basically long sloping channels of PVC. Some people will try to take 4-inch PVC pipe, drill holes in it, set the cups down inside there. My way of thinking is that the PVC pipe only has a hole in it, and my arm is simply not long enough to run up through a 10-inch or a 10-foot long piece of PVC pipe. You know, you can try to clean them out one way or the other, long brushes, but they actually sell commercial products, and they're two-piece. It's like a gutter and a cover. So if you imagine a vinyl gutter, they've got a cover on top. It's easy to use. They're pre-drilled. So the gentleman that's looking at the nutrient film, I would encourage you to look at those pre-manufactured channels. Both of the advantages and disadvantages that I've seen is that nutrient film technique is a very thin film. It's just a shallow trickle of water that's basically running in the bottom of the channel. So if something happens to your pump, you have no reserve, whereas in a deep raft system, you have a reserve of water. You've got the roots sitting in 10 to 12 inches of water. There's a thermal mass to that water that helps it maintain not only heat, but mitigates the temperature changes. In the nutrient film technique, if you've got this in an enclosed greenhouse and you're running 110 degrees in the summer, regardless of how much air you're pulling through there, that water is also going to be temperature challenged. It's going to be rather hot, and rather than having a deep thermal mass of water, you've just got a trickle of water running through the PVC troughs. So those are one of the things that we saw when we looked at it, and we opted not to. They're nice in concept, and certainly there's a lot of them. If you look at, this is a rooftop restaurant. We're on slide 20. This is a rooftop restaurant. And you can see the channels. They're basically like shallow gutters, and they have a plastic lid on top, and the plants sit in those lids within cups. And then the water trickles through, runs to a collection trough underneath, and that collection trough, by gravity, sends it back to the sump. This was an area that was probably 15 feet by 40 feet. Good production. I can't say anything bad about it. This was actually hydroponics and not aquaponics, but it's basically the same concept, whether it's a teaspoon of this and a teaspoon of that, or whether it's fish waste and dissolved nutrients. The nutrient film technique is still the same. So there's sloping channels back into a collection trough. The collection trough sends it into the sump pumps it back up to the top of the sloping channel, and you repeat the process. The third option that you see most commonly out there are called media beds, or flood and drain, or and it's basically a container, whether it's a square table or half barrels of blue barrels. They're basically about 10 to 12 inches deep. They are filled with gravel or some other media. The water is sent into these gravel beds, and then either through a flood and drain cycle or a self-siphoning or self-siphoning overflow, the water is then drained out. Some people use timers. Some people will actually put the water in at a rapid rate, let it sit, and then drain out on a flood and drain cycle. The biggest challenge is sizing the beds to accept the amount of solids that are going to be present in this nutrient-rich water that's coming into it. Because there's a lot of suspended solids. You may not be able to see it, but total dissolved solids does not necessarily mean, let me rephrase that. The amount of total dissolved solids is sometimes higher than you realize, because you look at the water and you say, "Oh, it looks fairly clear," but there's a lot of waste that builds up in these. And cleaning out 12 inches of deep gravel is heavy. It's time consuming, whether it's once a year or once every 2 years. A lot of people deal with this unless it's properly sized. And this goes back to the wastewater management technology. Reed rock filters, if that's a term that people are familiar with, Reed, R-E-E-D, rock filters are common in some constructed wetlands for bioremediation or for wastewater treatment, and they're sized properly. There is a particular square foot formula to how many gallons of water are going to flow through this. And I believe typical loading rates for those are, very small. Typically, a quarter inch per square foot per day of application. And you can do some independent research on this, but it's really in the media beds you have to be concerned about solids and solids removal. These are two photographs of media beds that I took. The one on the left is again at Apopka, Florida. They were growing gingers and some ornamentals in here, and starfruit, believe it or not. The flood and drain beds are better for deep-rooted crops. You're literally planting into the media itself. I don't know of anyone that's putting cups buried up to their shoulder in these media beds. Is it possible? Maybe yes, maybe no. But typically people, for production costs and production efficiency, they're planting directly into it. So they're using a small diameter media, something that has a lot of surface area to it, because the surface area is where the bacteria live. So if you have a lava rock with a lot of surface area in relation to the size of the rock, that's going to be better than using marbles, because the marbles don't have that same total surface area if you consider the indentations, the irregularities, and so forth. Hydroton, H-Y-D-R-O-T-O-N, Hydroton is a manufactured product, and expanded shale is another popular product that's being used in the media beds, as well as just river rock or gravel, pea gravel. Half-inch pea gravel is very common. If you look at the system on the right, this is one that kind of relates to what's typically called barrelponics, B-A-R-R-E-L, ponics. And you can see that there are two gravel media beds here. In the foreground, you'll see this is the fish tank, and also the sump. So the fish tank is acting as two things, both the environment for the fish to live and also the sump. You're pumping the water back up through an upper chamber, which is a growing raft, through yet a secondary chamber, which acts as a storage device, and then dumping into the gravel beds. And that storage device in the middle is actually operated on a toilet bowl flapper. This is an early designed man by the name of Travis Hoogley. at Aquaponics, I believe, designed this for the third world production. So those are media beds. Again, raft type, floating styrofoam, media beds, gravel and or hydrotone. This is a media bed system that's available for purchase. $2,700. Crop King is the distributor for it. I have not bought one. I have not seen them, but they exist. This is a 200-gallon tank and what appears to be a 4x8 growing table. I do not see a lot of filtration in there at all. Pumps look like they're available. Aeration, of course, for the fish. This is inside of what appears to be a hoop house or greenhouse. So they've got some controlled environment, but that's kind of, again, one of those off-the-shelf package pricing systems. The last system that we're going to talk about are what's considered hybrid systems. And the hybrids are kind of that combination. You know, people, again, are pushing this industry out. They're saying, well, there's some benefits to the gravel beds because they provide a biologic pointer. I'm sorry, biologic pointer. Excuse me, Joe. I was looking at a message. Use the pointer to point to parts. Okay, I'll see if I can turn that one on. So anyway, the hybrid systems are that combination of raft perhaps in one part of the greenhouse, gravel beds in another part of the greenhouse for different plants and different root structures. There are even modifications to the hybrid systems. People talk about air tubes. I think they're calling it aeroponics. And aeroponics are the vertical grow walls or vertical tubes that you see, and they'll cascade water down through the tops. It's kind of like a nutrient film technique. It's just absolutely straight up and down. So they've taken a 6-inch PVC pipe, they've cut holes in the sides, they've put plants into those holes, and then they cascade water down from the top. I have not visited any. Well, I take that back. I have seen one system. It looked very nice. It was complicated. They had it on a chain-driven rotating system so that the plants were maximized exposure to the sunlight, or the exposure to the sunlight was maximized. It seems like a fairly elaborate way of doing it, and that's my only comment on that. If you look at a company called Growing Power, and I went and visited their system a few years ago, Growing Power in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and also our system here, one of our systems, the initial system in Montgomery County, are what we're calling shallow gravel soil-based systems. And that's probably what I feel is has got the best of both worlds. You've got a shallow gravel area that provides for a high surface area, highly oxygenated environment for the bacteria to grow, and then you've got soil in pots that are nested into this 1 inch of gravel. And by the wicking action, the soil brings the water and the nutrients up into, the soil brings it up into the plant root zone. And the plants are in pots. You can harvest them, take them in and out as you choose to, and then replant and start from seed or from transplants. Waterlogging is an issue, and I'll kind of go over and show you how we address the waterlogging as we get further down. But if you can imagine taking a plastic pot, setting it in 1 inch of gravel, passing a stream of water through that gravel, then naturally the holes in the bottom are going to allow the water to wick up into the soil. This is a typical hybrid system. You can see, and Joe, I apologize, I'm not able to turn on my pointer, or have just forgotten how to do it. Let's see, there's the pin. Let's see, so on this side here, you'll see that these are floating rafts, and on this side here, these are the gravel beds. The gentleman in the middle is Murray Hollum. He's with Practical Aquaponics in Australia. He's one of the people that are very popular in the industry at this point, and very well publicized. Does some seminars not only in Australia but here in the United States. Have never met the gentleman personally, but if you go to his website, there's a lot of material, some for sale, some not for sale. He also sells package systems. This is a gentleman by the name of Wilson Leonard. This is a project that he did in Cook Island. This is also considered a hybrid system. You'll see that he has these long gravel beds. They're actually a series of 4x8 beds. And then on the far left-hand side, in this area right here, is the see if I can get you a nice bright yellow one here. This area right here are the floating rafts. This area here are the gravel beds. So he's using both floating raft and gravel beds. These are his fish tanks over here. He has 1, 2, 3, 4 fish tanks. This is a swirl filter, and this down here is the sump. This little guy up here is a constant flow biofilter. If you'll look at this picture, he's basically taking a water cascade, passing it through a gravel media, and that keeps the media wet. It allows you to have a healthy environment for nitrifying bacteria to grow, and it does not clog because you're not having a significant amount of water standing in there. The soluble solids are either consumed or converted into biofilm fairly quickly on the surface of this rock. And again, you're just passing the water through to bleed off the ammonia and to provide the bacteria a living area, a surface area to live on, so that as you're converting the ammonia to nitrite and then to nitrate, that's where a lot of that activity is taking place. And of course, it's also taking place in the media beds and underneath the rafts. This is Growing Power in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. These are his fish tanks. He's actually got floor channels cut, and those are his fish tanks, and they run the length of the growing beds. And then inside here, he's growing in either pots or trays, or directly in gravel. He's growing things like, well, you see the tomatoes up here on the top in 5-gallon pots. You can see these growing trays over here on the far right-hand corner, which are baby greens or microgreens. This is a fish feeder, a bump-type fish feeder that he's got here. So this is considered a hybrid system too. And these pots, again, you can see the depth of the bed. I mean, it's only a 2x4, so he's got it well supported. This is a little, he's double stacking it. So the baby greens underneath here are mostly just germinating. I guess you'd consider them almost like I don't know, just tiny germination of what's the word I'm looking for? Wheatgrass, like wheatgrass or something like that. So all you're doing is just you got thick seed mats. You're getting it up 3 inches in height, and then away it goes. So the tomatoes up on top are in full-size buckets. I've got a question here. Let's go ahead and take about 15 minutes, if you don't mind, and we'll post for some questions, and then we'll come back to the presentation. So I've got Roy asking about GFA, Grow Fish Anywhere in Israel. Roy, I'm not familiar with that particular one. I know that there are some aggressive projects in Israel or in the Middle East because water is so precious. I don't know that water is never replaced. We top off because transpiration of the plants takes place, and we do top off our system, but we do not do water exchanges. Cook Island is I'm not, my geography is not very well on that. I would think it's
Part of Australia.
North of Australia. Thank you very much, Richard.
Part of Australia. I don't know if it's north.
Part of Australia. Okay. I didn't know I had to do geography, Joe. Dr. Leonard is an interesting individual, and I'll talk more about his philosophy. A lot of these projects that you see are food production for challenged areas. I mean, as we move forward, the population increases. We're looking for ways to become more creative in how we grow our food. This isn't going to replace that 100 acres of corn or that 1,000 acres of wheat, but it's going to be a repeatable, locally sourced option for small greens. Laura has posted a question about plant crops. You'll find everything from cucumbers to melons to squash in some of the outdoor rafts. The crops that we're growing, or the plant type that we focused on here, were lettuce greens. We do have some tomatoes in production just because they look so darn good and they're there. My philosophy is that within a greenhouse, the faster I can turn the product, the less likelihood I am of having insect pressure, disease from overcrowding or from humidity, and we're basing our system on what the homeowner would like to do. If the homeowner can go out and cut a week's worth of salad greens for the week in one day, they touch the system one day a week. They go out, they cut a week's worth of greens, they reseed 3 pots, and that goes into a 6-week cutting rotation. Then we've done our job. The family's getting the salad greens. They're getting fish protein as they choose to harvest the fish, and it's a couple of hours one day a week, period, and the rest of the time it's on autocycle. So the plant crops can be anything that you can imagine. Tomatoes, peppers. You couldn't do corn. I would not suggest you attempt things like corn, but it's the high value, rapid growing crops that you'll find most often in aquaponics. Calcium carbonate is part of the conditioning system. If you do have a soft water, you start with looking at the pH of your water. The pH of our water, we're using rainwater. We do rainwater harvesting off the top of the greenhouse, and believe it or not, our rainwater is a little on the acid side. We're about 6.4, 6.2 on our water that we're using for makeup water. A healthy functioning system also has a process through the conversion of ammonia to nitrite and then to nitrate that releases hydrogen into the water. So by releasing hydrogen, you're actually lowering the pH within that water. So the fish don't want to live in acid water. The fish don't want to live in a 5.8 water. They want 7.0. So you need to start adding buffers like the calcium and the calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate to raise that pH. So if you've got naturally occurring water, you're still probably going to have to add some buffering because you're not going to be adding 20% of the water each time you top off. We're topping off, though, with rainwater. We don't run the effluent through a UV light, Paul. We've found no need to do that. It's an additional expense. There's the suspended solids. I don't know if that would be a real issue or not, but we do not run the effluent through a UV filter. We actually want some of the microbial life to stay within that. We're not real concerned about the fish poop because we're not watering directly on top of the plants. It's coming up through the roots. So the simple answer is no, we do not. Richard, you're asking about the nutrient value of the produce compared to traditionally grown crops. I'm going to bypass that one. The nutrient values, people, well, I'll give you my opinion on it. The nutrient values of organic crops versus commercially grown crops. I think that's a debate that is still unclear in my mind. Does a lettuce leaf taste any different, product A versus product B? I think a lot of it has to do with fresh. My personal philosophy is eat fresh, eat local, and the more local it is, if it's in your backyard, as long as you're not, contaminating your soil, that's a pretty darn fresh product. So the nutrient values decrease after the plant has been cut. They decrease rapidly. So the faster you can get it cut, rinsed, into refrigeration, as we all know, what we're selling when we're selling produce is we're selling water. We're selling water. So as soon as we can get that under a controlled environment, the better off we are. For my 2 cents. Fogponics. Fogponics, Chad, is again simply a version of aeroponics. In my understanding, is they're misting this nutrient solution from the fish and spraying it across the available roots or the roots that are available. I have never seen a fogponic operation, and really can't speak directly to that. Roy has posted something. Israel is the only country to make a desert recede. 4 million trees that should not exist. Is there a model we must pay for? If you look at the irrigation industry, the products that I use as an irrigator, a lot of them were developed in Israel. Nutrifilm, not Nutrifilm. Yes, a lot of the products were developed in Israel. So I think that they are very progressive in many ways. I have a friend who worked at an environmental, how would you call it, ecotourism area over there, and they were trying to bring in aquaponics. I don't know what they're currently doing, but yeah, anybody who's making a desert recede deserves a pat on the back. Okay, Jennifer's asking, the oxygen required in a reservoir of approximately 55 gallons. There are formulas for that. If you go to the Aquatic Ecosystems website, they will have specific formulas, and some of the papers that I have included as research on the end of the slide presentation also talk about that. It's basically what you're doing is you're looking at it and you're using a seat of the pants judgment. Am I getting enough air within my fish tank to prevent the fish from coming to the surface and gasping for air? If not, you add more air. I hate to say it's that simple. We're using a 200 cubic foot per minute, 200 cubic foot per minute in 2 3-inch medium diameter pour stones in a 150-gallon tank. And we have reserve oxygen that's being used elsewhere. So a small aquarium aerator with 2 3-inch stones would be more than enough. And those are $39 aerators. Typically they're rated by the gallons that they will support. But if you get very specific and scientific, the data is available at Aquatic Ecosystems. I do have numbers, Paul. I do have numbers on the energy use per unit of plant output. The last several slides are about the economics that we saw here, and I'll share that with you when we get back to that system. John is asking, is a sump necessary for a backyard system? Every system must have a sump of some sort, whether it is the fish tank, but every system must have what would be considered a sump that the water flows back into. If it goes up, it's got to come back down. It's a constant recirculating system. A separate sump, is it necessary? No. If I were to put a pump into a fish tank and a system failure occurred, I would be concerned that I would pump below the level of survival for the fish. Chad is asking, what are air stones? In typical aquarium stores, you'll find a blue semi-porous stone. There's an air tube attached to it from the pump. The air is then exiting through this fine pore stone. They're available at aquarium stores for the backyard grower. If you start getting a little more commercial based, they will start selling stones that are larger, handle more air volume, and they sell them in different grades, fine, medium, and coarse, so that the air bubbles are a little bit larger and you can pass more air through it. Okay, let's go on back to the slide presentation again. We're on 27 of 66. We've been talking about hybrid systems, and I want to kind of continue on that again. If you remember one of the first slides, it was the UVI system, and I said if you look at everything on the left, as far as the fish tanks, the filters, the recirculating systems, aeration, all of that is to keep the fish alive. The system outside, or the system to the right, was for maintaining an environment for the plants. A lot of people are trying to, and we among us, are putting everything into one enclosed greenhouse. And I think you'll find that some of the models, especially on the market garden side or in the areas that have more cold climates, you'll find that they're starting to split the systems so that they'll put the fish in one area. They can maintain the temperature in there. The bacteria of the biofilters can be maintained in there. The temperature level is a little bit easier to control in that small environment. And then they'll take that nutrient solution and they'll pump it out to the grow beds. And then, of course, it has to return by gravity back to the sump, or back to basically back to the sump. So start thinking in terms, if you're looking aggressively at this, start thinking in terms of a split system, so that if a failure occurs, you have to take the plants offline for some particular reason, the fish are happy, they're getting all of the filtration and aeration and solids removal that they need. These are, again, just some photographs of some of the, I don't want to say homeowner-based, but people that are experimenting with it. The one on the right, this one right here, is basically PVC pipe. These are the holes that have been drilled in the side. This would be considered kind of like a vertical wall, so that cups would go in here, plants would grow out. Nutrient film. This is with cups that are put inside of PVC. This looks like rather expensive, limited growing space to me. This one is an odd little piece. It looks like kind of a futuristic, bubble chamber, and they have a clear fish tank underneath. They have grow lights above, and the plants in the center. You'll find that because the industry has that "wow, that's neat" kind of feel to it, that people are selling products that it's $159. You buy it on eBay, and you're gonna get three basil plants. I don't know that there's a value to it, but that's an available option out there. I don't know the name of this particular one, Joe. I just looked at it, and it's just an oddball one that I thought I'd throw in there just as a curiosity. I would not recommend spending $159 on it. Seedlings, yes, a lot of people do start seedlings. These are in grow cups, little peat moss cups that then can be transplanted out into the system. They're within a net already. So whether you start, we're actually doing a combination of both. We're doing seed starting, and we're doing direct seed into the pots. We're doing germinated plants for transplanting and direct seed into the pots. Roy, I'm gonna be on solids removal in just a little bit, so I will come to that. And if I don't answer your question directly, please let me know. This is the Montgomery County-based system. We're calling it a constant recirculating aquaponic system. This is the grow bed here. I guess if we start at the lowest point, this is the sump on the far left-hand corner. Let me change my pointer to a bright red here. So this is the sump. Everything returns to the sump. The sump has one pump, which pumps it up, and it goes in two directions. It's going to go to the grow bed here, and it's going to go, a portion of it is going to go back to the fish tank here. So as the water comes into the grow bed, it passes through 1 inch of gravel. By gravity, it exits the gravel into the fish tank. From the fish tank, it flows through a solids removal device, and then from the solids removal device back to the sump. So it's in constant motion. We split it because the grow bed volume of water flow is different than the volume of water we want recirculating through the fish tank. And I'll touch on that here in the next few minutes also. But these components are probably, in some ways, everything that you'll see in most backyard systems. A grow bed of some sort, a fish tank of some sort, a solids removal device, and a pump or sump to send the water back again. Futuristic thoughts and ideas. I mean, this is a very attractive system up here at the top. See if I can get a nice bright pin here. If we look at this is a very attractive system. It could be in the lobby of an office. It could be outside of a restaurant, on an abandoned parking lot. We really need to remember that this industry is still got some growth. There are interesting ways of doing it. Is it the most cost-efficient method of producing these fish? No, not at all. I mean, the money that they've spent into this to produce, 100 square feet of greens, dirt in the backyard would be a more efficient growing system. This one here is again one of those, in my mind, is doomed for curiosity. It's got a fish tank at the bottom. It's got a wooden box at the top, and you're basically just circulating water through. Nothing wrong with it. Have at it. There could be some wonderful systems out there. We chose not to do this. This little screw-based system here, not quite sure how that would work because you're shading the plants underneath, but obviously they actually had a little solar panel up on top. It was rotating the screw device. Water would be cascading from the top and just trickling down and then back to the sump. Pretty neat little concept. Baby green production again, all self-contained. How they deal with solids removal, that could be addressed elsewhere. But think out of the box. I mean, we are in an industry right now that's going to allow us to think creatively for quite some time. Okay, flow rates. The first comment I made, or one of the first comments I made, was that this is basically a wastewater treatment system, wastewater treatment device. And you have to think of wastewater treatment in terms of solids removal and flow rates and system capacity. So as the fish poop, this semi-solid, suspended solids is going to flow through the system one way or the other, whether you go directly into a basket which has fiberglass screens, or not fiberglass screens, but media filters, or whether you're going to go into a settling chamber or swirl filters. You've got to get the solids out. And flow rates are very important in designing your system. The typical accepted rule of thumb by the gentleman that I consider to be the most knowledgeable in the industry, and based on aquaculture principles, is that we need a full exchange of water in the fish tank per hour. So if you've got 1,000 gallons of total tank system for your fish, you need to cycle 1,000 gallons per hour through that system. So if you took 1,000 gallons an hour and you pushed it through a 2-foot by 4-foot grow bed, or let's say 2 by 5, that's 10 feet, 1,000 gallons an hour tank, or 1,000 gallon tank, 1,000 gallons per hour through a 10-foot grow bed, you're pushing a lot more than that grow bed will be able to sustain. You want the plants to have time to take up that nutrient, and you want the solids to have time to settle out of the system. The solids settling is based on sizing the sedimentation tanks, passive sedimentation tanks, to allow for what's called retention time. In the grow beds also, you want a particular amount of retention time. So as you plan these systems, try to keep these guidelines in place. So if you have in our particular system, we have a 150 gallon fish tank. We have 2 sedimentation tanks that add up to about 50 gallons. So we've got 20 minutes of retention time in our settling chambers. And then we pass from the settling chambers into a media filter, what we're considering, it's actually an active filtration device, because you have to actively deal with it as opposed to passively let the solid settle out. And then into the sump. It's pushed back into the grow beds. The grow bed is 32 square feet. It is 4 by 8, so it's 32 square feet. It has about 1 inch of water in it, and through calculations, if you look at a 1-inch column of water is 0.623 gallons. If you just basic simplistic rounding off, if you say 1 inch per square foot is a half a gallon of water, that's 16 gallons of water in that grow bed. So we split the system so that we've got 30 minutes of retention time in our grow beds, and the water passes through at, it's I believe, 1 gallon, I'm sorry, half a gallon per minute through the grow beds. And I've got some calculations on the next slide that will help make that a little easier. But flow rates are something that we need to consider, and flow rates then relate back to what pump you choose. You're going to spend money on pumps no matter what you do. You can buy a very inexpensive magnetic drive pump that's rated at 200 gallons per hour, but it has no head height. And once you get up above 3 feet, it basically has no ability to lift that water. So you need to look at the pump rating for not only flow rate, but also for head height. Because from the bottom of the sump to the top of your grow bed or the top of your fish tank, wherever you're going to push the water, you've got to account for that head height. The magnetic drive pumps I found to be very reliable. This one is made by a company called Pond, or I think it's actually, well, it's distributed under the name Pond Master. And they're available online through several different retail outlets. Foster's and Smith sells them, which is a aquatic supply house. You can find them at pondliner.com. So there are just dozens of available pumps. We're using a 750 gallon per hour pump in our system. And you're saying to yourself, okay, well, he's got a total of 150 gallons in the fish tank. He's got 50 gallons in the settling, another 50 gallons in the sump. So he's got, maybe 250 gallons. Why did he choose a 750? Well, again, it was head height and the fact that we naturally assume that we're going to lose some flow due to clogging and or back pressure. This particular device, this particular pump here, is from the Apopka, Florida installation. You can see that it is a self-priming pump. This is a 1/2 horsepower pump rated at, I believe it's rated at 12 gallons per minute. So that's over 900 gallons per hour, but it's a very low power consumption pump. The advantage to using this is that it is available for maintenance. It's not sitting within the tank. Some advantages, some disadvantages. The magnetic drive sitting down inside the tank, actually the water helps keep it cool. You've got one pump, you've got no plumbing involved to separate it from the system. Some people look at air pumps or an airlift pump. I have never had experience with that directly. I've seen some systems that use it. If you can imagine taking an air blower, and you can use one blower in the system for both the aeration of the tanks and also for the airlift pumps, you're blowing a high velocity of air down into the bottom of a pipe, and the pipe then, because the air is displacing the water, it is moving the water out into your system. So an airlift pump might be interesting. You're also oxygenating the water at the same time. If someone is pretty creative and they start thinking about that, they have access to a large air pump, it's certainly an option. Okay, so again, this is some of the specific flow rates that we have in our system here. Again, the fish tank exchange, the biofilter and solids filter or sedimentation filter, and then the grow bed. So those are the three components that you're going to look at in sizing it. The fish tank, the solids filtration, and the grow bed. Plants need some time to take up the nutrients. The solids filter needs some time to let the solids settle out. And the fish want water that is constantly being recirculated so that they can have a nice clean environment to live in. So this is a relation to what we're doing here. We've got a 150-gallon fish tank, 3 gallons per minute flowing through that fish tank. Because our system is set that the grow bed is dumping a little bit of water back into the fish tank, we need to account for that water also. So when we are adding together all of our flow rates, we're looking at the amount of water that's coming in from the grow bed and also the amount of water that's being put back into the fish tank. The biofilter and the solids filter, again, you want a retention time approaching a half an hour. If you can get more, that's fine. You know, the solids are going to settle out. But it means that you have to have a larger biofilter or solid sedimentation filter. The three that are most common out there right now are swirl filters. And you'll see a picture of a swirl filter in just a minute. There's one called a radial flow filter. And the third is just media filters, whether they are there's actually a fabric. It almost looks like an air conditioning filter that you'd use on a furnace, except it's not a fabric. It is a expanded plastic woven filter, and these can be purchased. One of the options for purchasing these is Foster's and Smith, which again is an aquatic supply. You can go directly to people like Pentair Aquatic Ecosystems. They also have filters. But the most reasonable for the backyard gardener that I've found has been Foster and Smith Aquatic Supply. Plants' roots have no teeth, so they are not going to be able to take out those solids. The plants only get their nutrients through solution. So the solids really have to be dealt with in another manner. And the way I try to look at it is through mineralization or through a secondary treatment of the solids. You're basically taking the solids out of the bottom of our settling chamber. We're draining that off the bottom. We're then taking those solids or semi-solids in water. We're adding air to it, and we're also adding our buffers to that slurry. And we're then letting that sit for a week under aeration. We take the air stone out, we let the solids settle down, and then that liquid that's on the top, it's like taking a bucket of mud, swirling it around, letting the mud settle to the bottom. We're then pouring that clarified liquid off back into the system, into the sump tank. So we've done two things. We've added our buffers. We've aerated the sludge to try to help mineralize some of the, or dissolve, or however you want to phrase it. We've tried to get that additional nutrient out of that sludge into a dissolved state so that we can then pass it back to the plants. Solids removal is important. You don't want to just dispose of that as something that is a waste product. Again, if you go to the aquaculture industry and the kind of the bad rap, don't eat pond-grown fish, yada yada yada, it's the solids management. These are the filters that that we currently employ, and this is from Dr. Leonard's system. This is a swirl filter, and I'm going to try to use my highlighter again and see if I can find one that so this pipe that you see here is actually the pipe that the water from the fish tank enters into the swirl filter, and it's entering in about a third of the way down. The water flows in at a relatively slow rate. It swirls around in a circular pattern, and the solids you can see are kind of settling out down to the bottom down here. As the solids settle out and the chamber fills, then clean water then exits over the top of this spill pipe. So you've got water coming in that has suspended solids, it swirls around, the chamber is constantly full, and then it exits through the top. We have one swirl filter in place. We're struggling with it. It's not performing exactly as we had intended, and it could be because that we've got some string algae in that particular system. We're experimenting now, and what we've gone to now on the more mature system is what's called a radial flow system, and it's a very similar concept, except this entry pipe will actually come up into a basically an empty elevator shaft. The solids then settle down to the bottom. So it's still the same thing. It's a passive system. If you think about the systems that you have in place, passive versus active, this is a passive system. Water comes in, solids settle out, clarified water exits the top. So look at swirl filters and radial flow filters. The image up here is the next step after it passes through the solid sedimentation filter. That particular filter is nothing more than a cabinet with filter media in it. You know, again, I referred to the air conditioning filters. It's an expanded plastic. The water is just trickling through it. It's exiting and goes back to the sump. You do have to go in, clean those filters. I mean, it's once a week, but there will be buildup on those filters. And this is the sludge or the mineralization tank. The bottom solids, the solids that come off the bottom, are drained off from a bottom drain, goes into a bucket, and then you basically just dump that bucket with the solids and the liquid into an aeration chamber and just let it aerate for a period of time. You turn the air off, the solids settle down, and then you pull the clarified liquid off the top. Laura just posted a question: approximate nutrient value of the solid sludge. I will send Joe Masami a sample of that. It is whatever has been left that the fish have not consumed. In our particular instance, we are not as concerned with the nutrient value of it. Does it have nutrients in it? Certainly it does. It has fish poop, lots of fish poop. It has, and we're not throwing it away. Again, we're trying to dissolve it and pull it back out. If I sent you a fresh sample of it, we can see what, if there are some NPK and some micronutrient values. And Joe is commenting, use it in your garden or your compost pile. I've got a third option for you. So this is, again, the UVI model. If you remember that one, that was the largest one from the front. It had all of the long grow beds. It had 6 100-foot grow beds. This is their sludge pond. And they do exactly what you're suggesting. They are letting this aerate for a particular period of time. They then stop it, change sides, and muck out the sludge and put it into a garden area. His filtration devices are sedimentation. These are the two These are the two sedimentation tanks here. This is a basket of bird netting. The bird netting, again, is just providing surface area for the bacteria to grow on. And as it passes through here, the solids are settled out. The water is then returned. The water then overflows into a screen mechanical filter, which is nothing more than netting. And from that screen mechanical filter, then it goes into the sump. So he's taking sedimentation, bacterial surface area for denitrification or for ammonia conversion to nitrate and nitrite, and then he's returning all of that liquid into the sump. The nutrient value is an interesting one. I'll send you some, or I have some data on the on our final product. And what we do with it, let me go ahead and answer that right now. So what we do with our sludge, let me back up a little bit. What we do with our solids is we've got the swirl filter in place. We're draining off the bottom solids. We then put it into this aeration chamber. Our particular system, we utilize worm and vermicomposting in our system. So we're taking that sludge, we're dumping it on top of the worm beds, and we're letting the worms digest that as they go through their normal process. When we harvest our greens, and this makes our system a little bit unique. When we harvest our greens, let's see, when we harvest our greens, I'm thinking of bouncing forward. Do you guys mind if I bounce forward here real quick? Oh, you don't mind? I've got the pointer. When we harvest our greens, this is a slide of the current grow bed, and you'll see that these are pots. This is the gravel right here. This is the 1 inch of gravel. So when we harvest these greens, the roots that are still in the soil are, you can try to dig it out, you can try to do whatever you want to with it. What we do is we just harvest the greens. We give it a destructive harvest haircut. We take that entire pot, roots and all, we take this entire pot, roots and all, and we dump it into worm bins that's sitting under this grow table here. So you've got 3 worm bins sitting under this grow table, and we literally dump that into the worm bins. We then take our sludge and we pour that on top. So we've given the worms moisture, we've given them some root mass to chew on, and they're happy as can be. So that's what we're doing with our sludge. That's what we're doing with our sludge. The nutrient value of the worm castings, we then take the worm castings, they go back into the pots, and we're actually planting almost directly into worm castings. So you're saying, why do I need the fish at all? Well, they do provide a good deal of nutrient. Even if this is a sterile potting mix, they would provide a good deal of nutrient. The worm castings it's not 100%. To prevent waterlogging, we actually put in a 3-inch layer of native hardwood mulch, so the roots have some root space and some aeration pockets, and then we cover that with the worm castings and then plant directly into the worm castings. So I'm going to go back. Just back to where we were. We're at 11 o'clock right now, and yes, we're basically at the tail end of our presentation. Nitrogen cycle, since you are all professionals in the industry, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the nitrogen cycle, but suffice it to say that the ammonia from the fish as the conversion takes place to nitrite and then to nitrate, the hydrogen atom is released. The hydrogen atoms then lower the pH in the soil, or lower the pH in the water, which in turn is the reason that we have to buffer it to bring the pH back up. So in a fully functioning paper or a fully functioning system, your pH is going to naturally lower. Micronutrients and macronutrients, obviously these are the things that the plants need to grow. They are available in the system readily. The nitrogen is available through the nitrogen cycle and the conversion of ammonia. Calcium and the magnesium are things that you may actually have to add. We're going to take just a quick couple of questions here. I've got some people that are leaving. Designs for the Montgomery County facility, yes, they are available. They're part of this presentation. Just go to that slide, enlarge them, and they're there. We also have a cutting list for that system. Publications written on your systems that you might be able to sell. I have not written any papers on it, but I'll be happy to, Chad. It's necessary to protect small backyard aquaponics fish tank from sunlight. John, the question has to do with algae growth, and yes, we do shade our systems. However, the tilapia actually do a real good job of cleaning the sides of the tank for the algae. Protecting them from sunlight, though, it's more a matter of protecting them from predators. But most everyone does protect the tank from sunlight and predators both. Question about Holiday, or from JB Holiday, do you have to introduce beneficial bacteria? No, time will actually bring, the bacteria is available. I mean, if you want to jumpstart the system, you can. I would not go out to a pond and dip the water out, but the beneficial bacteria can be introduced into the system. We take water from an existing system and introduce it into the other one. They do sell a beneficial bacteria, nitrosomonas or nitrobacter, that actually are for jump-starting the system. That's available through some of the aquaponics forums. John is asking, should you have any type of fish in grow tanks and raft systems, minnows, catfish, etc.? The raft systems, a lot of people have found that unless you have a particular type of fish, they will actually eat the roots hanging in the raft system. I believe that in UVI they've gone to a kind of a bottom feeder type fish that is not real interested in the roots. So you might check with the publication that's available on your publication list on the UVI system. We do not have anything in our raft system and have not found that to be an issue. UVI is University of Virgin Islands. One of the questions that I'm going to come back in for just a few minutes. One of the questions has to do with vermiculture and aquaponics, and people saying I've got worms in my grow bed. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Worms in your grow bed, in my mind, are beneficial. Are they taking out any of the solids versus the total body mass that they're growing? That's a debatable point. You know, they're excreting worm castings. They're moving through the soil and mixing the solids. So perhaps their best function is just mixing the solids within the media bed. The worm castings are certainly available. I mean, some people tout worm castings as the panacea to all issues. I think they're a valuable resource, and the direct evidence that we have through testing is that we have a worm casting ratio that is almost a 3-to-1 mix for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, but in very low concentrations. But it is a balanced product. John is asking, can seeds be germinated in the floating rafts or elsewhere and transferred onto the rafts? Yeah, typically they will germinate the seeds in pots and then transplant into the slotted pots into coconut fiber, or we're actually using 1/4 inch expanded shale in our growing pots, so we don't have the coconut fiber drifting down into the raft system itself. But yeah, transplantation into the rafts is most common. I have seen some people try to do germination. I don't have any direct experience with that. We germinate directly in soil in our grow pots. Chad is asking, do you make any worm casting tea for your plants? We do not make any worm tea because the entire product is used back into our grow pots. Applying manures, and worm tea is basically an animal manure, directly onto the greens. There'd be some harvest time considerations. I don't think that's a problem, but just to be aware that some people say that the worm tea creates a beneficial environment for certain bacteria to grow on the leaves, which helps prevent some fungal issues. We have not done that directly. That's an interesting question, though. The last part of it is going to be fish selection. Why did we use tilapia? Fast growth rate. You want a fish that's going to be able to survive in your environment, that will tolerate the extremes in temperature that you have, and will also grow fairly quickly, because you want them to consume food, you want them to poop, and you want those dissolved solids to get back into the system. So that's why we chose tilapia. Available, rapid growing. Other fish choices, some people use this for ornamental fish. Bluegill, we have some growers here. They're stocking ponds using sunfish or finfish of some type. And they've asked me to try it. I have not at this point. One of the comments was that they would not clean the algae from the sides of the tanks. Catfish, there's a little slower growing. We have one individual that has tried it, but I have no direct experience with that. Crawfish and prawns are something that people really like to say that they've got great success with. I don't see any published data on good prawn production. Barramundi is another fish that you'll see. It's similar to tilapia. It's an import issue. Where to get the fry? If you're starting to do these systems and you're looking at tilapia, go to the local Fish and Wildlife and see if there are any restrictions on that. Feeding, we feed approximately 1% of body mass per day. And this slide is pretty self-explanatory. You can go through the calculations yourself. One of the terms I mentioned earlier was stocking density. And the stocking density that we are running is about 1/4 pound per gallon. So in our 150-gallon system, we have approximately 40 pounds of fish. Using duckweed and black fly larvae, we do grow duckweed. We grow duckweed as a byproduct and we feed that to the fish. They probably don't get more than 2 or 3 cups a week, but it's just another. It's taking out some of the nitrogen. It's helping to. It's just an easy plant to grow, and the fish like that supplement to their diet. They told me so personally. Again, 1% of the body mass. Dr. Ricosi's example of production, he bases his production on how much food do I have to feed to the fish based on my growing area. So we're on slide 45. If you look at the feeding and the charts here for UVI, or for the University of Virgin Islands, this is all based on growing area, just growing area itself. So what he's saying is if I've got per square meter of growing area, I need to give my fish 60 grams of food, 60 to 90 grams of food, because that's going to allow them to generate enough nutrient into my solution based on my stocking density to provide the approximate nutrient uptake that I need for 1 square meter of growth. So if you do the math, you're going to basically find that it's going to require 2.14 ounces of food per 10 square feet. Well, that's great. Now if I look at how many fish do I need, how many fish do I need that are going to consume that at the rate of 1% of body weight, or 1 to 1.5% of body weight? Well, in our particular instance, 20 pounds of fish will consume approximately 3.2 ounces of food per day. So doing the math, you can work it in 3 different directions. Growing area, you know, if I want to produce 100 heads of lettuce, I need X number of square feet of growing area. You then go backwards and you say, well, if I've got this much growing area, how much food do I need to provide the nutrients for that growing area as a result of the fish consuming the food? And then you go backwards one more time and say, how many fish do I need to consume that much food? And then the final calculation is, based on stocking density, how big are the tanks? All of those calculations are covered in detail in the publication that Dr. Ricosi has available, and is referenced at the end of my presentation. This is a short example for doing it. We're talking about water quality, dissolved aeration, dissolved oxygen, and water temperature and water quality. We touched on this briefly before. Water quality is 6.5 to 7. Tilapias stop eating at about 55 degrees. They really like that 80-degree water. They're in their reproductive state. They're happy. They're healthy. 80 degrees, 75 degrees. They're happy as can be. So in summary, we're going to tie it up. If you don't want to look at the pictures, they're certainly available on the slide. But in summary, you have to think about this as a managed system. And one of the biggest challenges you're going to have is solids removal. When people ask you, why would I want to do this, I would suggest that you tell them that it is not only for the food production, but it is also for the layering of benefits. They provide nutrients for the plants, protein for the humans, joy and beauty in some sense to a number of people. Older gardeners are very attracted to this because there's no bending. It's a little easier method of growing food. And let's see if I've got anything else. I quickly bounce through these. All of these are available to you. We are in a greenhouse for costs. Let's see if we can hit costs real quick. We are in a greenhouse that only measures 10 by 20. 10 by 20. It's only 240 square feet. Capital costs for us in building just the system alone was a little over $500. That did not include heaters. So if someone says, how much would it cost to replicate the system out in Montgomery County, I would start talking about $1,000. That's going to give you heaters, some control systems. It's going to give you the grow beds, the tanks, the aeration. So $1,000. This is a bare bones system, no heaters. The implied revenue is basically how much are we able to produce. And based on our data, we're able to produce at $6 per pound of baby greens, $6 per pound, we're able to produce 40 pounds of greens in our system. 40 pounds of greens relates to approximately 1 pound per week per family. If you go to the store, you get an 8-ounce box of mixed greens. It's about $6. In addition to that, we've got $96 worth of fish based on $7 a pound tilapia. 2 harvests per year. Operating costs. Someone had asked about electrical and operating costs. The $118 here is mostly for the pumps and the heaters. This $118 is electricity cost for the pump and the heater. We're adding a little bit back in for the initial cost in the biofilter for plants. At this point, this number is really not relevant. This was back from the original system. And then this is seed cost. This is seed cost here. So you've got electrical cost, you've got seed cost, and then you've got soil and or plant cost. 2 quick questions that came up on where do you grow your duckweed stock. Actually, JB, we actually grow the duckweed in the solid sedimentation tank on top of it. It also occurs naturally because it was introduced environmentally. It's occurring in our shallow gravel beds. You can grow it separately using a separate nutrient flow, or you can just say to yourselves, okay, on top of these solid sedimentation filters, I'm going to let it naturally populate, and then I'm going to scoop it off once a week, because your solids are falling to the bottom. The exit is blocked by a T, and the duckweed does not flow out of the top. And the drawings that will be made available, you'll see that in the photographs also. Where do you purchase nutrients, equipment, etc.? This is from Jennifer. The nutrients, like the hydrated lime, or not hydrated lime, the calcium carbonate is agricultural lime, is readily available, any garden supply. Best to purchase startup equipment, nutrients, etc. If you don't get a kit, Jennifer, if you don't get a kit and you want to try to build it yourself, the first thing you need to do is have someone who just loves plumbing and is a pretty good handyman. Then you start, we actually have a list of materials from our last presentation. Most of it came from pondliner.com for the pumps and the aeration and the liners. The rest of it was, Tractor Supply for holding tanks and for barrels. So it's sourcing those products. You look at the system, you say, okay, you make a decision. I'm going to buy a packaged kit, or I'm going to go out and source it and build it myself. Once you do that, be happy to send you a list of the materials that we used. Disease and insect problems. We have not had a lot of disease problems. We had some damping off earlier in the winter. We because we were direct seeding into the worm castings, we solved that by using a sterile mix in the top quarter-inch just to get the seeds off of that, what could have been contaminated worm casting soil. Insects, it's just typical greenhouse management. If you see whitefly in there, you struggle with it. We don't see whitefly. Again, the philosophy that I have is nothing stays in the greenhouse past about 6 times 7, 42 days, less than 60 days. So every 6 weeks, we're reseeding with a new pot. Is it a continuous cycle? Yes, it is. But the disease problems tend to be on older, stressed plants, and we're just not seeing that. JB is asking if municipal water supplies, due to chloramines, toxicity to fish. Yes, you do not want to have chlorine introduced into your system. A lot of people will take 55-gallon barrels, they'll fill them, let them gas off for a period of 2 to 3 days. We're using, if you're using well water, you're fine. Test your well water, check your pH, check your hardness. But the chloramines are an issue. You do not want to introduce that directly into the fish. In our rainwater systems, we have a 300-gallon tank that's off the back of this little 240-gallon or 240 square foot greenhouse. So we do make up a small amount of replenishment water that is diluted into our rainwater with public water. But again, it's in a 300-gallon tank. We're putting in 3 inches in what may be 12 inches of existing rainwater, and then it's going to sit for a day before it's ever introduced back into the system. We've had no problems with that. Larger plants, bush beans, okra, etc. Yes, John, those are possible in the system. Some of the people were doing okra trials and found the production to be equivalent to soil-based, but it's valuable real estate. It's valuable real estate. I mean, bush beans take up a lot of space for very little product. You look at the numbers, you say, what can I get per pound of bush beans as opposed to per pound of cut lettuce? I'd go for the cut lettuce. Bell siphons, Janet is asking. Bell siphons in the media beds are very popular. They have several different styles. Some of them have an air tube that acts as actually an air tube down into a tiny little cup that acts as what they consider to be a more foolproof system. Bell siphons have to be regulated by flow rate, and in our particular history, we have not used bell siphons. We do continuous cycling, continuous circulation. Bell siphons are just one more thing that can cause you problems. You have to put water into the gravel beds at a particular rate that is enough to trigger the siphon and yet allow the bed to drain down and stay oxygenated for a period of time before it refills. So sizing of the grow bed and the water flow going in are 2 variables that we just chose to bypass. Ideal pH for the fish, 6.8 to 7.0. They will tolerate 8.2, but the ideal pH is in that neutral range, 7.0. Richard's asking cost of the fish food, $22 for a 50-pound bag, floating catfish food from pretty much any feed store that you've got in the area. I would not go to the Hobby Lobby and buy the 5-pound bags, floating catfish food. We're at 11:18. Again, we basically have established our criteria that we believe if you discount the cost of the greenhouse, our total budget when we started this system was $6,000. That total budget built the greenhouse, put the system in place, and gave us high quality fans. The pots that we're growing in are being used again and again and again. Yes, Richard. The cost of the food is included in those operating costs. So our annual operating costs do include the power, the food, and the seed costs. The revenue is basically just, again, greens and so here's the operating cost. We have electrical, and then in the fish tank and the biofilters, the fish food, and then the seed cost for the growing bed. Here's the resource list. When I started doing this, I was looking at the Southern Regional Aquaculture Center. One of the papers that they have online is this particular product, or this particular publication, the UVI Aquaponic system. It's a nice detailed manual, take you from start to finish. You're welcome to send requests to me, and I'll be happy to, or forward them to James Sobney, and I'll be happy to send you our particular cutting list. I cannot speak directly to the other individuals. Dr. Leonard, I have personally met and dealt with. If you go to his website, aquaponic.com, he has a large amount of material on there that is very detailed and very specific. Laura is asking how much labor per time of day is required. We actually look at the system 1 day per week, and we do that we're here for 4 hours. It's part of the Master Gardener program. I would think that your total labor per day would be less than an hour a day. If you're harvesting.
Can I say something, Jim?
Sure, go ahead, John.
For a greenhouse 30 by 130 feet with 2 large beds and 2 small on the sides, the grower told me 7 hours a day for one person. But
that's not unreasonable, because they're doing a lot of that is harvest and transplanting, perhaps maintenance of the system.
But
That's not unreasonable, yeah.
But every 5 days he harvests and sells 500 lettuce plants.
Right.
So it's 56 times a year. No, not 56 times. 40 weeks out of the year that he works. Let's do a quick math, give you an idea. I remember I told you earlier that his initial cost is about $30,000, but a year later, 40 weeks of production times 7 days divided by every 5 days, that's 56 harvests times 500 plants times 3 plants, $3 per plant. He's making $84,000 per year from that one greenhouse. But of course, he's working by himself, and he's working 7 hours a day.
Well, and mathematics and reality, and I don't want to question that at all, because I just can't speak to that directly. But $3 a head for lettuce is going to be at a local farmers market with people who have disposable income.
That's right.
You're going to have fluctuations in your growing seasons. So,
of course, that's exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. That's not the total. That's assuming everything is the same, but there's variation.
Right. But yeah, you're right. It's a full-time job. If you get into this commercially, it's a full-time job. Janet is asking how much do the fish cost. I've seen anywhere from 50 cents a pound at some of the, there's a company, I didn't put it on the resource list, there's a company here in Texas, in our area, selling fish, and it is, I apologize, Janet. I'll get the name and send it to you. But 50 cents a pound. I got 20 pounds from them. They were $10. They were fingerlings. Are you using standard 1-gallon plastic pots in the media grow beds? No, actually we're using a clay bowl, John. And the clay bowl, excuse me, I'm going to bounce back to that real quick. The clay bowls act as a water storage, moisture retention product. You can see the tomatoes are actually in 1-gallon pots. I would use nothing smaller than 1 gallon because of the high moisture and high wicking issues. You don't want the roots to be waterlogged. As these roots exit and get into the gravel bed, the plant is just as happy as can be. And you'll see, I'll be happy to document this and send some additional photographs. These are just cherry tomatoes that we had come up in the growing beds or had come up in the media, in the worm casting media. Will catfish reproduce in the system? Richard, I have no direct experience with that. Clay bowls, Jennifer is asking. I actually went to Marshall, Texas, and got those clay bowls. You can buy them at Lowe's. You can buy them at Home Depot. They're expensive, but they're also permanent. Lowe's and Home Depot, I think they're $10 a pop. And that was part of the initial cost. Believe it or not, we factored that in. If it were me, I would probably start with 1-gallon pots. They're readily available. But the clay bowls came from Marshall, Texas, and because we were a nonprofit, we got a significant discount. Getting some questions about the worm bed construction. Yep, Marshall Pottery. Thank you, Randy. Local clay, as a matter of fact. Laura is asking a little bit more about the worm bed construction. They are half barrels. They are stacked one on top of the other so that we have about 6 inches of depth. The worms receive the waste from the harvest, which includes all of the soil, all of the root mass, and then we cover it with a layer of newspaper, just shredded newspaper, and then we dump the sludge on top of that. So we basically have a lasagna. As the worm beds get full, we've got 4 of them, so they've basically had about 3 months, not 3 months, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, we get about 3 harvests. So they've had 3 weeks per bed, almost a month, a little over a month, to rest. We then dump all of the soil out. We go through a 1/4-inch screen, and that then becomes our potting mix that goes back in the bowls. As I had mentioned, because the worm castings become so dense, we actually do mix in some perlite into the worm castings, and we put in a 3-inch layer of first ground native hardwood mulch in the bottom of those pots. So if you can imagine, that provides some aeration space. The worm castings go on top of that, and then we direct seed on top of those worm castings in little channels that we create, and then cover that channel with a sterile potting mix. Is it time intensive? Is it labor intensive? Maybe, maybe not. You want to put transplants in there? Go for it. You're still starting in a sterile mix even in transplants. I like the worm castings. I don't think you're going to see a system quite like this other than maybe growing power, but it's been functional, and it's easy to keep in balance. Sedimentation is the biggest issue. Out of the fish tank, we were now on our 3rd iteration of filters, and I think we finally have it with the combination of swirl filters We're using radial flow, but it's basically a passive filter mechanism. Last question. We're going to tie it up. It's 11:30. Anyone have one final question? If not, I want to thank you so much for your participation and thank you for your patience and your invitation. Chad's got one more question coming in. Thanks for your time. You're very welcome.